mean, the first book was mainly her and these two guys, and this one, yes, they're both part of the plot, but like you have a few other people who like are thrown in, so it feels very much like a group trying to figure out what's going on. And so because of that, I had this really yes. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my September wrap up. September was the autumn equinox, the autumn version, if you will, of the Orilium Magical Readathon hosted by G. And I think, if I am correct, every single book that I read in September worked for one of the prompts. So I didn't read anything kind of like extra. I mean, I did read some extra things, but I made them all work for a readathon prompt, which is great. So I'll leave all my vlogs linked down below and tagged above, so that if you are curious about what prompt these books fit, you can go there. Otherwise, I'm not really going to mention them in this video. I'm just kind of going over what I read. So without further ado, let's dive into the stats. In September, I read 11 books, which is over 3,792 pages and about 98 hours listened, and that was over 5 audiobooks, 2 physical books, and 4 mixed. Age category, I actually hit almost everything this month. I had 2 middle grade, 2 YA, 1 new adult, and 6 adult books. Genres, pretty limited this month. We had 4 romance, 6 fantasy, and 1 thriller. And ratings, again, kind of all over the place. I hit some more than I usually do. We had 4 5-star, 2 4-star, 4 3-star, and 1 2-star. The first book that I picked up this month was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is actually part of a series. It is the second, or third. It's the third, actually. I lied. The first book in the series was Part of Your World, so it's the Part of Your World series. The second one is Yours Truly, and then this one, Just for the Summer, obviously. It's just kind of like companion in a sense of like there are characters that show up in multiple books. They all kind of work in healthcare, but there's not a whole lot like that I was told crossover wise. I'm gonna come back to that in a second. This follows Emma and Justin. I can't remember exactly what Justin does, but Emma is a travel nurse and she travels around with her best friend slash sister. They kind of grew up together. She was in the foster care system a little bit, so they basically grew up together. And Justin and Emma both suffer from the same problem, which is the people that they date find their one true love right after breaking up with them. And Justin makes a Reddit post about this, and Emma decides to reach out, and they end up starting to talk and decide to basically do this thing where they date each other for a summer. They kind of like decide on all of the parameters and decide like what works and what doesn't in the past relationships, and they decide to date each other so that they can find their one true love afterwards, hopefully breaking this curse. I love this book. So before I dive into what I thought, trigger warnings for toxic parent, panic attacks, loss of a parent, PTSD, and past child neglect. Sorry, I can't even read my own handwriting. So let's start with the fact that I gave this 5 stars. I've never read an Abby Jimenez book. I didn't really know what to expect, and I loved every second of it. Like immediately, like within the first few pages, and I don't think I'm even exaggerating that, I was like immediately hooked by the characters. I don't know if it was the writing, the characters, the plot, the world this author's created. I don't know what it is, but she hooked me right away, and I was like wholeheartedly invested in the story and the characters. I loved everything. This also has a very interesting kind of conversation when it comes to families. This shows both toxic and loving families and familiar relationships and the good and bad of both. So I really like that because our main 2 characters, Justin and Emma, come from very, very different worlds and very different family upbringings, and at the same time you can see the difference in how they were raised, but also like the good and bad of both. Especially, I'm realizing now that I totally forgot to mention that Justin's mother basically does some not so great things with money and ends up having to go to jail. And so over the course of this book, he is taking on the legal guardianship of his siblings. He's got 3, I think. And so he takes on that while he's trying to date this girl. So that's also like a hurdle, if you will. But I just love their relationship. It's so loving. It's so like they go in with a plan and like they don't hide who they are. Like they talk about things. They are very open with each other about what's working and what's not. Mostly, of course, you get to the end and there's got to be some stuff that goes down because you need a very climactic ending. But like, I just love, like, this is a romance. It is. It's fluffy. It's cute. They have all their moments, but the core of this book is about family. And you also have like like I said, one family is good, but like they're dealing with a loss, and one family is very, very toxic, but like you learn some stuff about them as the story goes on. Like there's just a lot with this book. Before I went into this book, I mentioned it in my TBR, and I was told by some people to not read this one first, read Part of Your World first, because there is some overlap. I heard some other people who said it doesn't matter. I went in, and there is a note at the back of the book, I think. No, just kidding. There was in the audiobook that I listened to, there was a like, oh yeah, there's a Q&A with Abby Jimenez. And there was a Q&A in the back of the audiobook. And so basically what it said was some of the characters that were mentioned in the very first book get a bigger exploration within this book, and the main couple from the first book plays a role in the end of this book. I liked that I didn't know. If I got into this one, I would have seen some of the stuff at the end and how it came to be. Whereas with this one, because I didn't have that information, I had all of these like shocking turns and twists with the story. And so, yes, it would have been probably nice to know that, but like now I can go into the first book and know this story and kind of get an idea of like what they were about originally. I don't know how to explain it, except for the fact that like I'm glad that I went into this one first before I read the first one. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but like it does to me. I don't know. Either way, I loved this book so much. It was great. It was perfect for like the end of summer, beginning of fall vibes. I love this. If you want like a romance, but you don't want like, if you want a romance, but you want a lot of substance to your romance, she's another author to give a try. The next one that I picked up was The Moth Keeper by Kay O'Neill. This is a middle grade graphic novel. I've read other things by this author. This is the author that did the Tea Dragon Society trilogy, which I read and loved and like is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This one, I just literally sat down and did it in like a day, and it was great. I picked this one up recently because again, I know this author and I like this author's art style, so I wanted to honestly want to read everything that they've written, and this just happened to be the next one. So I will do anything for the art style. I love this author's art style, their use of color, and just their ability to, like, there were multiple times in this book where like there were pages with 0 dialogue and there were multiple pages in a row, and it showcased like so much of the story in those stills, which I think is just, I mean, that's just a statement of all graphic novels, but not every graphic novel has so many. A lot of graphic novels don't have very many panes that are just images and with absolutely no text or explanation, and there was quite a few in this one, and you didn't need the dialogue or the text to tell you what was going on. So I just loved it. In this world, we have, I can't remember what they're called, but it's like a society that lives at night. I think they're called the Night Village. And there was this like spiritual being who created the stars and all of these like beautiful things at night, but everyone slept at night, so no one saw them. And then one night, a few people noticed the beautiful night sky and everything that this person has created, or this goddess has created, and they changed their entire society to be night people. And so they changed their entire society so that they live during the night. And so our main character Anya is training to be the Moth Keeper, and the moths are very, very important for many things. They help out with many aspects of their society, and so there's one person, it's a very solitary task, but there's one person who goes out at night to kind of take the moths to like basically feed. The best way to describe it is it's kind of like a shepherd, where they take the sheep to feed and then bring them back. Like that's kind of what the purpose of the Moth Keeper's job is, and so Anya is taking it over and kind of learning from the current Moth Keeper. Anya has a very interesting backstory because like she's basically abandoned by her mother and was discovered by the Night Village people, and she is like, I'm fine, I can do this alone, I don't need anyone's help. And then it's really about her discovering the importance of community and things like that, and how it's okay to need help and how it's okay to need people. This was very cute. There was nothing particularly like profound about this plot, but I was not the target audience. This is a middle grade, so like a lot of this came very easily. So of course a younger audience would probably enjoy this way more. I still give it 4 stars. It was still a very fun experience. I still love this author and will do anything for them, but like, you know, it was good. It was a good use of an afternoon. I like sat down and I had coffee and I watched. I had some ambience on that was very fall. It was perfect, and like that's what I like from a good graphic novel. So I highly recommend, especially if you like their art style. This was a very different story, and I did like the world. It was a very fascinating world that this author had created. So I'm so glad I read that one. The next book I picked up was a Christina Lauren book, and that was The True Love Experiment. I answered this one 3.5 stars. This one was a very strange experience for me because it was the first time I went in. This is the first time I left a Christina Lauren book feeling disappointed. It still was like a good book because clearly I gave it 3.5 stars. Like clearly something worked for me. But what I found interesting was this is actually the sequel and a duology. The first one was The Soulmate Equation. I feel like nothing was spoiled. Like I still don't know how The Soulmate Equation goes. I just know it's about like an app, and the main couple in it, Fizzy, who's the main character in The True Love Experiment, is the best friend in that book, so she gets her own story. So there's not really anything spoiled except for the fact that the couple, like what couple got together. If you go into romance, I feel like you already know how that part's going to end, so I didn't feel like anything was spoiled. In this book, Fizzy is a romance author, and she is giving a commencement speech at a college and basically like is talking about living out loud and living your truth and like falling in love and all that kind of stuff. And she feels like all of a sudden she is not living that. And so she kind of goes down a spiral a little bit. And she ends up running into this guy named Connor, who is a small documentary filmmaker, except for the place he works for. His boss is basically saying, hey, so all that like side stuff you do, great, important, whatever, I'm gonna need you to do a reality TV dating show. And he's like, that's not my thing. And he goes, well, make it your thing. And so he ends up coming up with this idea after running into Fizzy about doing a reality TV show where the person, or like a Bachelorette style show, where the Bachelorette is Fizzy, who is a romance author, and everybody on the show is a like archetype of some form of romance. So this book, it very clearly states at the very beginning that this is a ode to the romance genre and romance books by this author duo. Great. I think it's very important to have that. I feel like romance is still like, people make fun of it a lot, even though it's like one of the highest grossing genres out there, but like there's still a lot of stigma around romance, the romance genre. So I loved the intention behind this. The things I didn't like about this was that the chemistry between Fizzy and Connor, immaculate. Every time they talked, it was like this bantery, like, I don't know, funny, making fun of each other situation, and it was so funny. I loved that. The chemistry was like crackling. And then you get to the romantic scenes, the sex scenes between them, and it was nothing. Like it felt very, very flat, which felt wrong for the fact that the chemistry was so good. The fact that this was about a romance author, you would assume that the romantic elements would be great, and they weren't, in my opinion. They were just kind of like there. I don't know what it was. It just like, it felt like that part of the romance didn't work for me. I also felt like the writing of this was so much different than any other Christina Lauren book that I read. Like I went in and it felt like a totally different author writing the story. I don't know how to explain it. It just like, it did not feel like them, and I don't know why, and I cannot pinpoint what about the writing didn't work, because like I read so many different stories by them at this point, and I've seen the writing change based on the story and the characters. But for some reason, this one specifically, I was just meh about. I will say the endings have become come to realize that endings can make or break the story for me, and I'm a sucker for like a love confession or declaration, and the one in this book was great. So it made it feel like the whole like struggling through, not sure if I liked it, was worth it. Ironically, maybe, that my favorite part, or my favorite relationship in this book was not the main couple. It was between Fizzy and her best friend Jess. I just loved seeing their relationship. I loved seeing how supportive they were for each other, and also they were going to call each other out. I loved the fact that like you could tell this was a friendship that had lasted over the years, because like there were multiple times where like they would have full-on conversations without like actually saying anything out loud, to the point of like Jess's husband was like, yo, could you just not do that? I've seen you do that too many times. So like it's clearly something that happens a lot. So there was just something about the two of them and their friendship that genuinely made me happy. I still loved Fizzy and Connor. Again, like their chemistry was amazing, but the best relationship was between Fizzy and Jess. The best friends, beautiful. The next one was Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. This one, I'm giving 5 stars to. Apologies if the angle changed. Peanut was doing something cute and I needed to record it. Okay, so my feelings about this are very, very similar. At least like general feelings about this are very similar to Just for the Summer, because like within pages, I was hooked by our characters. I was hooked by the situation. I was invested wholeheartedly, and I cannot explain. This was our main female lead, Sophie, who at the beginning of this book is getting married. But her fiance cheats on her, I think it is. So her maid of honor knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, or whatever. This guy named Max, who's the objector, and he literally stands up at weddings, objects, because one of the two wants to end it, but can't for one reason or the other. I believe, if I remember correctly, Sophie can't because her father works for his father, and was afraid that her father was going to lose his job. So Max does this for her, and then they kind of strike up this friendship, and she ends up becoming an objector with him, and it's their relationship. The plot is nothing I've seen before, so that was really fun to read. It's like a totally different situation, but like they were just really cute to watch. And Sophie's kind of put herself in this like true love doesn't exist, and she believes that Max also believes this, and then she ends up getting hired for his ex's wedding by the guy, and she is like toying whether or not to do it because this is like the one that broke Max, kind of. And so that really sets things off. I just love that. It's not a super long book. It was really cute. It was really fun. There's not a whole lot to it as far as like a plot goes. It's just kind of like genuinely a cute story. Don't go in expecting a whole lot of maybe character development and things like that. They're just kind of cute together. And if you want something fun and fluffy, but you want a situation that you've never heard before, there you go. Plus, I just really like Lynn Painter's work. This is the second thing that I read by her, and like I genuinely love her stuff. The next book. Okay, the next one is my 2-star, and that is the first volume of Sasaki and Miyano. I have thoughts. Apologies for the thousands of angle changes. Someone is insisting on being difficult. And now you're smiling. Talking about this one. So, Sasaki and Miyano is a manga series. It's a boy love manga series, and I have the first 3 volumes, and I'm gonna unhaul all of them because this was like I was so confused the entire time I was reading this. Like that was my biggest complaint, was that like I had no idea what was going on. The plot, fine. It's this older boy and a younger boy at school. The younger boys got bullied, so the older boy stood up for him, and they've kind of become friends. And the younger one reads boy love manga, and the older one is discovering boy love manga through him. And so they're like have a friendship kind of because of that. And so like the younger guy is giving him lots of like different mangas to try out, and it's supposed to be like a romance between the two of them. I went down the rabbit hole and I looked up the synopsis for all 10 volumes, and it is a will they won't they the entire time. Like even the very last volume has like part of the synopsis is like a, well, will he finally give in to the feelings or something like that. And I'm like, I don't mind will they won't they if it doesn't take forever to get there, but also I have to care about the characters, and I do not care about these at all. There's also multiple points in this where I can't figure out who is saying what. I can't figure out what is a thought and what is a speech bubble. And there's a couple of characters that look identical, and at sometimes I couldn't figure out who was who and who was saying what. So like, overall experience, very negative. It's not super long, which was good. I was able to get through it really, really quickly. I had my moments where I liked it, which is why I got 2 stars instead of like a 1 star, but I do not have the patience nor the want to continue with the series. So I'm gonna haul these and I'm gonna send them right back to the used bookstore or book warehouse that I got them from. The next one was also kind of a little bit of a disappointment. I had a few in a row that weren't great, and that is the Hemlock Queen by Hannah Whitten, which is the sequel to the Foxglove King, and I gave this 3 stars. I think my biggest issue with this one was there was too much time between this one and the first one. I do this a lot. I put too much time between the first and the second book in a series, or between other books in a series, and then I go in with super high expectations because I really enjoyed the previous one, and then this one is because I don't know what's going on, or I've forgotten some stuff. About halfway through, I got invested in the plot again, and some things were changed to the point of like, I'm now interested in this book again, or in this series again. And if it was a very long series, I might give up here, but because there's only going to be one more, I think I can handle it. And like, this one ended on a cliffhanger. I mean, the first one kind of ended on a cliffhanger, but I feel like this cliffhanger is so much more. And I do need answers, especially after some of the stuff that happens. And this feels like a very like group kind of plot. And because of that, I felt like a collaborative experience. And I had some characters that we did meet, I think all of them in the first book, but it was, I don't know, it was fun to see them all working together. So yeah, I don't think that the last book is going to be like a super big hyped release for me, but I enjoyed my time with this one. It was fine. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad that I didn't own it and I picked it up from the library because I have no use for it now. Honestly, I'm probably going to unhaul the first book at some point just because like it's pretty and I like it, but I'm never going to reread it, you know what I mean? So I liked it. It was fine. I should tell you what this is about. I'm realizing that I haven't even told you what the first book's about. So the Foxglove King, it follows our main character Lore, who has this ability, like in this world there's this like essence is the best way I can describe it, that is like death. And so she has the ability to like mess with it. And so one day, but she kind of keeps obviously that hidden. And one day she ends up getting caught and accidentally showcasing her ability. And she's like, oh, well, this is it. I'm either going to go to jail, which is like an island real far away, or I am dead for sure. And so she's just like accepted this fate. And the king decides, actually, I need you to spy on my son because I think there's some stuff and there's like someone in our court that is a spy, and I think it might be him, and I want you to get too close to him. And so she enters the court as the cousin of this guy who is in like this world's version of like a priesthood, and they become really close, and she becomes really close with the king. It's kind of like a love triangle, but like it's not. I don't know how to explain it. Like this in the first book, it's not. The second book, it gets more complicated. But like in the first book, all 3 of them are kind of like working together and they all care about each other. So that's cool. So things happen. And the ending was very dramatic. I did remember the ending, but a lot of the characters I had kind of forgotten. And so I couldn't find a good synopsis online that spoiled, like a spoiler synopsis. So like if I had had that, maybe that would have helped. But the plot was interesting. It had some stuff. We learned more about magic. There's some other things that we learned more about in this that I found really interesting. So like it had its moments, but overall it was just kind of okay. The next one was another kind of meh, middle of the road book, and that is The Ghosts of Rose Hill by R.M. Romero. This one also got 3 stars. I've read something else by this author and really loved. This author has like amazingly gorgeous covers too. But like this was, I think, the most recent one actually. It's very, very contemporary. The previous book that I read was historical, so like that really threw me off. So this is a very contemporary book. So this is a girl who loves to play the violin and is really good at it, but her parents are like, you need to give up on that dream and go for something that is more probable. Like you can't make a career on violin. So do something else that's better for you. And so they send her to live with her aunt for the summer. And so her aunt lives next to a graveyard. And so she goes walking around and she runs into the ghost of a young boy. And so they become friends, and he's like showing her around this city. And then she runs into this kind of like older, scarier guy. The way that I describe it is he reminds me of like the voodoo man, the shadow man from Princess and the Frog. And so there's some stuff with him. There's some other ghosts that she meets. It gets weird. So this book is written in verse, which in theory I was all about. I love books written in verse. I think they're really fascinating. I listened to this on audio as well as physically read it, and you can't tell. So if like you don't like books written in verse, just get the audiobook and you would never know. The chapters are super short, but like the way it's written is just like a normal novel. It's just like formatted differently in the book. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's not like poetic, it's not flowery language, it's nothing like that. It's a book. So like I'm curious what the point of the verse was, because it did not feel like it had a point. That was something I thought I was gonna love about it, and then it was just okay. The plot was interesting. We got like, there's definitely some danger and some interesting characters that we met near the end, but I found myself spacing out a lot during this book and did not really care much about what was going on. So it didn't hold my attention a lot. I will say this is a middle grade, so again, not the target audience for this book, which is fine, but it just, like, there wasn't anything about it that grabbed my attention and made me listen and made me want to continue. I just kind of like had it on the background and genuinely forgot about it at times. So, you know, maybe I missed things that would make me enjoy the plot more, but at the moment, like, it just, I could care less, honestly. It was just kind of okay. So like 3 stars because like the ending was interesting. I just overall don't really know what to think about it. The next book, however, was my favorite book of the month, and that is Never a Hero by Vanessa Lynn. I love this series. I love this author. I was very worried going into this one because, again, a sequel after reading The Hemlock Queen and having that like sequel experience, because I had waited a year or two, I want to say, between this book and the previous book. I remembered a lot from this plot, but also it was, she had a really, based on how the last book ended, the way that she was reminding the audience of like characters and stuff that was going on in the previous book totally made sense. So this series I have talked a lot about. I love, 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 love the series. Our main character, Joan. In the first book, she discovers that she is from a family of monsters. And in this world, monsters aren't humans, but they time travel. But the way that they time travel is they steal life, years, days, you know, months, whatever, from humans. So they take life from humans and they use it to time travel. So if they want to go a day in the past, they have to steal a day from someone. It's kind of like that. That makes you a monster, but each family has a specific special ability on top of that. So that's what makes you a family. So in the first book, Joan discovers this about herself, and the guy that she has a huge crush on, she discovers is a monster hunter. And so she ends up teaming up with this guy from a rival family as they're running away from this monster hunter. Him and her cousin, actually. The 3 of them are running away from this monster hunter. And like the way that the first book ends is if you are satisfied, don't read the epilogue, and then you can pretend the book ended there. The epilogue kind of makes you think about the future a little bit. This one goes a lot. I can't really tell you anything about this book because it would majorly spoil the end of the last book. Like, it's one of those things where like a big thing happened at the end of the first book, which sets off the rest of the events. And so because of how that thing, this is going to get like really weird because I have to be super vague. Because of that thing and how it happened, I had a very clear way that I thought the series was going to go. I had a very specific like, oh, because of that, there's really only one way forward. And it felt like a cliche to do that. And the author said, hold up, here's this other way actually. And I liked it so much better. So the thing that sticks out to me the most about this world and this series and everything is the uniqueness of it, but also the ability to like wholeheartedly consume my thoughts. Like, I went into the first one expecting nothing. I didn't really know what to think about it. I think I read it for a Magical Readathon, actually, because it had like something on the cover that I needed, and I had not even had any interest in picking it up before then, and then it became my personality for like a good week. And so I loved it. I loved the uniqueness of the world. I loved the good versus bad. Like, there is a lot of stories that you can read out there that have that, like, from the villain's perspective, or like gives you a different look on good versus evil. But I've never seen anything like this where it's from the villain or monster's perspective, but like the monsters are good, but like Joan is half monster, half human, and so she thinks that what people are doing by stealing life is terrible, and so she has a very different outlook. So she's very, very torn between these two worlds, and I found just following her in this world is fascinating, and the ability for this author to just like wholeheartedly consume my thoughts when I'm reading this. Like, this is not a small book. This was at least 500 pages, and she's just announced finally. Like, I found it yesterday, so she just, as of filming this, so like a week before you see this video, she announced the third book, which is going to come out sometime next year. There's no date yet. It's just going to come out next year, and she's released the title, and I am so invested because like this had a cliffhanger, not like a ridiculous cliffhanger. It still felt like an ending, but like there's definitely like so much more to the story, and I believe this is going to be a trilogy. She could keep going, honestly, and I would be satisfied. So like, this is her debut series. She's got a fan of me for sure. I'm excited to see what other things she comes out with, but like if she just wanted to keep going in this series, I would be a big fan. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep raving about this book forever. So just know that I love the series and I love this author, and this one does a lot more time travel-y things than the first one did. We did a little bit of time travel in the first one, but it only went back to like the 90s, I want to say. That hurts my soul that was time travel. This one goes all over the place. So lots of time periods to enjoy, both past and future. So if you're a time travel person, this is a very interesting look at it, and I don't know how to explain it. I just really love this series. The next book that I picked up and read was Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I have given this one 3 stars. I have a lot of conflicting emotions about this. Feelings, whatever, about this, because I've watched the movie a few times. That's how I was introduced to the story. And I've heard if you watch the movie first, which I think is true for a lot of things, you will enjoy the movie more. And that is true for me. The plot was fine. The plot was actually pretty close to the movie. Or I guess the movie was pretty close to this. I mean, there was a couple of things that were switched around. There was a love interest that was really played up in the movie. That's not even a thing, really, in this book. And then there's a couple of like characters that like weren't a big deal in here that were in the movie, like things like that. So they definitely played up some things in the movie to make it great, but the plot was pretty similar. The things I didn't like about this, the biggest thing was the writing and the formatting. So this is put into 5 different sections, and they all have something like this. Like this one's called Superstition. And then here's another one, Premonitions. So there are 5 sections throughout this book. Now this is not a very long book, but there are 5 sections throughout this book, and each section has like little to no break. So if you are physically reading this, you got to sit down for 50 to 100 pages and just kind of like know that you're going to have to do that, or you're going to stop in the middle of a scene, because there is no break in the story. And like, while I liked having those 5 different sections to break up the story, it made sense for the story that was being told. Why was there no breaks? I mean, there were a couple of moments where like you had like those, I'm trying to find one, and the fact that I can't find one, I think is very telling. Like here, you see that there's a break here, okay? There was like one of those in each section. Like there really wasn't that many. Also, the way this was written was very much, as a reader, I felt disconnected from the plot. Like all the events and the suspense and everything that was happening to a character was happening far away. So I didn't feel like there was anything except for one scene. I was like wholly invested in like one scene, but everything else, the action was happening far away and I couldn't be bothered. I should tell you trigger warnings. There are trigger warnings for domestic abuse and attempted sexual assault. So I'm sure many people know what this is about because the movie's relatively popular. This follows two sisters named Sally and Jillian who were orphaned pretty young, so they grew up with their two eccentric aunts who were like, it's not stated in the book that they were witches, but they like do some stuff. And so because of some of the stuff that they see, neither sister really wants to have anything to do with that. Jillian is like, the minute she can, she leaves, and she just jumps around from guy to guy. Sally finds a guy, falls in love, they have a couple of kids, and then something happens and he ends up dying. And so she ends up moving away with her two kids. And then Jillian resurfaces many years later with some stuff that's going down. Like I said, the plot itself, very similar, if not identical, to the movie. Sorry, the movie is identical to the book. Things that were disappointed, the aunts played like no role in this book. I mean, they did because I think they raised the girls and they showed them growing up with these aunts, and then they like disappeared, and then they were a big part of the end. So it was like they just came back to be a part of the end, but like as the reader, they weren't a big part, whereas like they were probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. There's a love interest for one of the sisters near the end that's like a much bigger deal in the movie, and I liked him in the movie. I like what they did with him in the movie. I don't know how to explain it. Like, this just felt meh. There wasn't anything exciting. The plot was meh. The writing was meh. There's not a single character in this book that I liked, which I feel like is very telling. There might be like one person near the end. I think there's a love interest near the end that I liked a lot, but like he barely played a role. But neither sister was fun. The aunts weren't fun in here. The two daughters who grew up a lot in the series, like we see them turn into teenagers, they're awful to each other. And I sat here going, why? Why is this a thing? So, you know, I read it. I think I should get credit for reading it. I'm good. I don't need to read it anymore. I'm not interested in anything else in the series. I think there's like a sequel and a prequel, like a novella maybe in this world. I'm good. I don't really need that in my life. So yeah, that can go. That can go away. The next book that I picked up was The Last Flight by Julie Clark. I've read another book by this author. She had another one. I don't remember what it's called, but I read it. It was like one of the books I got in Book of the Month. I think it was last year. And it was about a con woman. And I really enjoyed it. So I looked into books by her. This is one that looked interesting. I picked it up. It is amazing. I gave it 4 stars. So this follows our two main characters, Claire and Eva. Claire is married to a politician who is in the media. He's about to like start a campaign. I can't remember what for, but he's about to like really, I mean, he's in the news because his mom was a senator, and like it was a senator that everyone loved. He's about to really be in the news, but he's abusive, and Claire has tried to leave multiple times and failed. And so she's finally like trying to find a plan that'll work to the point where like she can actually leave. And she runs into this woman named Eva at the airport, and they end up switching flights because they've already gone through security. So like the only thing they need to do is scan the boarding pass, and that's it. So Eva takes Claire's flight to Puerto Rico, and Claire takes Eva's flight to Oakland, California. Unfortunately, the plane to Puerto Rico goes down and everyone dies. And so Claire is like thought to be dead. So she's trying to figure out a way to hide herself away because like she has a very recognizable face, and her face is everywhere because her husband is such a big name. And she ends up kind of taking on Eva's identity a little bit. And so you've got her, and then you've also got all these flashbacks because like at the time of switching tickets, we know why Claire needs out, but we don't know what's going on with Eva. And so you switch back and forth between Claire's perspective in the present and Eva's perspective in the past, up to 6 months leading up to the crash, and then, you know, moving towards the crash, which gives you an explanation as to why she needed to leave and gives her a little bit of a backstory. So, trigger warnings. Obviously, domestic abuse and assault, both physical and emotional, and then drug abuse is a huge part of the plot as well. So just kind of know that going in. But I really enjoy Julie Clark's books because at least the 2 that I've read so far are very like girl power books. And I just really like it. Like even the last book, which was about a con artist doing things and a woman who's out to get her because she conned someone in her life and it caused her problems, but it's discovered that she only cons men who were bad, and it kind of like is her way of getting back at them. And so like even in that book, even though there is like a villain, if you will, like you feel for the con artist. And the same thing with this one. Out of the 2 women, there's kind of like one that has like some stuff going on, and you don't really like you feel bad for her because she's been put in an impossible situation. So she's really good at blurring that line and taking at least one of her characters and putting them in a situation that normally would be illegal, we would think of as bad, you know, whatever it is, and gives you a different look to the point of it makes you rethink, okay, maybe in this instance it's not terrible. So I was on the edge of my seat. There was suspense. It was fantastic. I loved it. I will definitely be looking into more books by that author. I don't think she has a ton, but like, that's a name I'm going to pay attention to. And the very last book, I ended the month. Well, technically, I finished this in the first couple of days of October. But if you watched my last vlog, you will have seen that I started Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune, which is the sequel to House in the Cerulean Sea. And I needed it for a prompt, and I did some stuff to make it work. So, like, go check out that vlog if you are at all curious. But I technically finished it in October, but because it's part of the Magical Readathon, we're just going to pretend that it was September. So I gave this one 5 stars. I gave the first book 5 stars as well. So I went into this one, like many people, going, why on earth is there a sequel? I was content with the first one. Why do we need more? And then I finished this book and I went, okay, I get it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. It had been a couple of years since I read the first one, so it was a lot of fun to kind of like fall in love with these characters again. So maybe I wouldn't have had that experience if I had read them back to back, like if I hadn't have read the first one yet, or have I reread the first one recently. But I liked that feeling of falling in love with them all over again. I thought it was fantastic. So the first book in the series follows our main 2 characters, Linus and Arthur. Mainly Linus, it's from Linus's perspective. He works for the government. It takes place in this world where there are magical beings and the government is in charge of making sure they're taken care of. And so they have homes and orphanages all over the place for these magical youth that they go to. And so he is sent to an island that is run by a man named Arthur, and he's got a home, and there's like 4 or 5 children, I think. All these kids are extremely special for one reason or the other. Like, one of them is the Antichrist. His name is Lucifer. They call him Lucy. He's my favorite one. And so you see Linus kind of start to understand the world a little bit more and start to really thaw towards these kids and the man, Arthur. In this book, we follow Arthur. I mean, it's from Arthur's perspective, and it takes place after the events of the first one, and it kind of has the same plot line, if you will, which was my only kind of like, I would say, problem with this book, is that the base plot line of a government worker coming to check out this orphanage, it's not an orphanage, it's a house, to see if some stuff is going on, happens again. Except for this time, it's someone who is worse. Like, Linus is a decent person. And this one, the lady who shows up is awful. And so you really, really don't like her. And there's some other stuff politically going on. This is this author's take on trans issues. It's not stated that they are trans issues. It is stated as like magic versus non-magic, but like the government being in charge and people having opinions and saying certain things about like you can't be who you are, X, Y, and Z. It's clear that's what he's trying to do. He even says at the very beginning of the book that this is dedicated to people in the trans community. And there's even an author's note at the end. I cried at the end. Not because the ending wasn't emotional, because it definitely was. It was super cute. I had lots of feelings. I cried at the author's note. Who does that? He like talked about the queer community and like all of his books being for the queer community in some way, and why this one was for the trans community. And like he had the story about this kid who came up to him at like a school visit one time, and that just like melted my heart. I don't know. There was just like a few things. So like it's very obvious. I think once you know that that is what he's trying to do with this book, I think you could very easily not know that, because it's the story about magic, you know? It's his magical, fantastical take on that. And so it's not incredibly heavy-handed, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's very, very heavy-handed in its political conversations, and like, I think this one is like, the first one is nice and fluffy and fun, and this one has its nice fluffy fun moments, but it's a little bit more serious because the stakes are a little bit higher. So there's a lot of conversation about like politics and the government's role and things like that. So like that's very heavy-handed, but the fact that this is the author's take on the trans rights issue, I don't think is as obvious unless you know. I don't know. I could also just be super blind because I was very into the fantastical elements of the story and I fell in love with these characters all over again. So like, maybe I was just focused on the wrong things. you know, everybody's different. So, yet again, a home run by TJ Klune. I've only read 3 books, including this one by him, so I really need to get up and start. What? Yeah, I can't speak. That was weird, wasn't it? Everything I've read, I've loved. So, like, this author clearly has a fan of me. I definitely want to read all of his stuff. I just am not good at it. And every time I read something, I come out of it so excited and so happy because I loved it. And then I take forever to read another one. So hopefully I don't do that. Moral of the story is I loved it. I went in thinking he was kind of like pandering maybe to his audience of people who loved the first book. And I couldn't have been more wrong because like this book was so good and so needed and just honestly amazing. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry that this was kind of all over the place because someone insisted on screaming through most of it. She's still making noises. So I did it in this quick. So I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, let me know how your reading in September went. If you participated in the Magical Readathon, were you successful? I was, even though I needed some October to do it, but I was. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video. That would be fantastic. I'd love to know your thoughts. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links. So check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!